Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Business and Banking Dialogue Show. At the outset, I must apologize for this delay. Somehow, they're on online session, and sometimes when you want, things don't get connected. Today, I had to change my entire laptop because the old laptop was just not working. I'm so sorry about it. Welcome to the show. As you know, this is a live bi-weekly show every Wednesday and Friday. We come to you live across YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So thank you for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, with global supply chain disrupted and many physical places of business closed, the scope of impact to individuals, small and medium enterprises, as well as large corporate is still not very well known. It's still an unknown factor in this pandemic. What is evident is that all groups are facing a cash flow crunch and unknown future that threatens economic and financial market stability. We have heard from several speakers in this in our business and banking dialogue show uh, on how Indian banks should reshape and meet the challenges posed by the pandemic. But what about the foreign banks? With COVID second wave challenges also typically in many of those head offices where these foreign banks are located, how are they coping up? What is the strategy of the head office with related to offices that are located in India? What is the direction to banks operating in India? So let's get to know about how they function, how are they coping up, what are their challenges, and how are they trying to resurrect the entire in this black swan of problem that we've had. So let's meet and let's talk to Mr. Santosh Mahalingam, Managing Director at Mashrik Global Services, India. You'll see quickly a brief profile about him. Uh, Mr. Santosh Mahalingam is a transformation leader driving digital automations, building high performance teams, establishing client centric AI culture, and strengthening partner ecosystems. With 25 years experience in banking industry, he was, as you see, there is you see his profile on your screen. Um, he has over 25 years of experience in banking industry, and he was also the head of retail operations in Mashreq Bank. He's also worked in senior positions at Standard Chartered Bank and Qatar National Banks. So right in front of you, his career is there, brilliant career across many of the foreign banks. So let's get going and talk to him on the pandemic and its impact. So, Mr. Mahalingam, the pandemic has had a severe impact on the human life. So there's no doubt about it, and the social fabric. It has had an impact like never ever before, at least not in our lifetime. How did the banks, particularly the banks with globally distributed teams, to ensure that there is no impact on the accountability of results?
Yeah, thanks, KK. And at the outset, thank you for inviting me here, privileged to be part of this forum. Uh, and thanks for the nice introduction. Let me also tell you about a bit of Mashreq Bank. We are one of the oldest banks in UAE. In fact, I would say one of the first banks in UAE, which was set up much before the independence of the country of UAE. We are a bank which brought in many firsts to that country, including the first ATM, the first debit card, so many things we brought in, and we are known as an innovative bank in the region. We have offices in around 14 countries. We have a branch in Mumbai for the last 40 years, but for the last 15 years, we have the back office operations technology center in Bangalore called Mashreq Global Services, from where we support the entire technology development and rollout and the other functions of information security, operations, credit underwriting, analytics. So, on a question, KK, in terms of specifically how does the banks like us, have evolved and adopted to this entire situation which has happened last year?
Yeah.
Uh, I would say that it enforced a kind of a new operating model in all the banks, like any other organization, right? And everybody went through the change. The fact that you and me are talking through the video today on a video conferencing collaboration tool, probably we wouldn't have done 1 year back had not for the pandemic, right? So
Yes,
that's the change we are talking. That
absolutely.
uh, but many of us looked at this entire change in terms of operating models of work from home model, which is not true. Uh, when you look at a bank like us, which operate in UAE, it's a small country, but still we had to move people to home. In India, I had 1,000 employees, which all of us had to move to work from home. We had offices in Nepal, we had offices in New York, Hong Kong, Mumbai. All of us moved to work from home. So generally, while we all consider this a new operating model as a work from home, which is not really the whole idea in terms of how we want to do that, because when we talk about accountability of results, and I look at multiple stakeholders, the KK, it is not just our customers, but it's also regulators, it's our shareholders, it's other partners, it's other stakeholders, etc. Right? So there's an accountability to everybody to maintain the kind of service which you have promised to deliver, and to also maintain the security of the data and the confidentiality of data which we promise for our customers to keep. Right.
Yeah.
So the way we looked at this whole new normal was to build a distributed organization, which not is not necessarily what we would define as a work from home in that sense. It has multiple components when you talk about a distributed organization. So we looked at, first of all, we looked at the strategy in terms of how we want to do that. When we started off precisely last March, we don't know, like anybody else, how long this will do. Is it temporary? Is it medium term? Is it long term? But honestly, we're now into 11th month of it, right? It's really become a long term for us right now. But there on the strategy, we were looking at how to lead the change, how to relook at the whole security system, how do you want to ensure customer service is uninterrupted, how do you look at the collaboration tools for people to interact, the staff to work, how to do more sales, how do you continue the business, how do you interact with regulators, etc. So there is a tons of work which happens really on the strategy part in terms of defining what are the various norms we want to look for. Once we looked at that, then we looked at the organization and people, because now you're looking at, interestingly, no more can any employee feel the organization culture. They can only see through video conferences. So there has to be a different way of looking at meeting employee expectations, looking at onboarding new people. Your recruitment has to continue, your exit has to continue, your training has to continue, right? So the entire thing about establishing a remote and distributed way of working was completely different. So that is something which you really look at in terms of how to ensure the security, what are the work from kits, what people have, how do they operate, what are their issues in terms of connectivity, etc., which is something which all industries went through really. But to my mind, fundamentally, the way we looked at in terms of how we want to sustain our results, sustain our responsibility was a tech enablement. When I say tech enablement, it's just not limited to enabling the remote working of people, but also from a point of view of customer interaction. How do they interact with us? There are many customers who have not visited the branch for the last 1 year for obvious reasons. So how do they reach us? Is it over phone, or they give us some self-service channel tools? Can they solve their problems themselves? Uh, we rapidly deployed multiple tools towards achieving that. And I should say that some things which the industry would have seen to happen over a period of probably 3 years or 4 years, we would have done in 6 months. So that's a real revamp of the tech stack which we did. And also we built layers of security on top of it, because we were working out of a public network for a period of time. People working from homes, and banks are slightly different from the other industries, because any data leakage has significant impact, not only on customers, but also from the regulators, right? So we had a lot of work to be done on that front. We also looked at, in terms of continuous service, not to drop the ball, how to look at the operational excellence part in terms of how we define the end-to-end digital framework and metrics. We need to ensure that every employee does what he's supposed to do. We need to look at the targets, what they need to achieve. We need to look at the quality of performance, what they were, achieving it. In a traditional way of face-to-face work, AK, you would see it's all huddle boards. You have the officers, you have all the view, you can view your team. It's a completely new experience, even in terms of a supervisory levels, how people could reach out to their folks, right? It's a complete new way of banking. In fact, out of my 25 years of experience, multiple times I did try to see whether we can really look at a hybrid model of work from home, from office, especially in the BPO sector in India. But the
Yeah.
biggest issue for me has been data security and regulatory approvals. It never happened. And we all were forced to do it during the pandemic when, this happened and we just had to get it done. So that way on a governance and service management, there was a lot more challenges. There was a much more greater ownership. Not this, that is something which I found it very different. When you look at a traditional model of working from office, KK, you feel that the supervisor is responsible for the duty of the employee. Now, in a remote working, the employee becomes responsible himself. And we amazingly saw that they grew up to that particular responsibility very, very fast. Okay, they are mature individuals. We think to deal with employees have a very rigid structure, you have to put norms, you have to do all that. Now look at here. The person is at home, the flexible timing, he logs in, takes his break, logs out. We're not defining anything, right? So that was a complete change when you shifted the responsibility, saying, hey, listen, now you're not monitored to the way you're monitored in office. We don't know whether you're coming in, you're not punching in, you're not punching out. You're there doing a job. The output matters. So that's a different way we looked at in terms of how to manage the output versus the input, right? So that made a huge difference in terms of how we were able to sustain the entire operations. And uh, not even a single day we dropped the ball. It was difficult initially. People had a lot of logistical issues, power failures in India, in other countries. Just like the technical issue you had, everybody faced day in and day out. We all went through the journey, but they caught up. Okay. So initially it was against the working hours of 10 hours, people worked 12 hours, but ultimately the single most message we sent across to the entire teams in the distributed model was the client is important, the customer is important.
Yes.
The customer transaction, get it what may, we will reach them. Because that message was consistent across, and that really helped up to work out with all our staff in 14 countries working out of their distributed model, single-minded focus on client delivery and consistent communication. That has really made us move ahead with the entire thing of sustaining a delivery, looking at the multiple changes which came, including deferment of interest, changing rules. A lot of things happened during the period in terms of what we're doing. And at the same time, it also became increasingly important for us to not to drop the ball on the technology development and the changes we want, because that becomes more critical for us,
Yeah.
right? It was a double whammy: sustain the job, work on the tech, changes, get it live, because you have to make that for future. You can't stop it. I would say it was double effort from normal, but people beautifully responded to it. So I think it's a multiple factors when you talk about accountability for results and what we did to sustain it. It's just not one single formula which worked. It is a combined effort and a complete, well thought out strategy with respect to how to run the organization, how to build it for future. There were two distinct sets we were working towards, right? That's how I would summarize it, KK.
Okay. But typically, yeah, unlike say the Indian banks who are predominantly in India within this country, yours is an organization which is well spread out throughout the globe, and each country has had its own share of the COVID problem. Some limited, some are extensively damaged and like complete lockdown. During this process, how did you get the world across to to meet your head office requirements and the statutory requirements? And that's the what is there anything special that you all did?
See, I wouldn't say there is no magic wand to it, KK. There's no
Yes.
special, but I would go back to a point which we felt made a huge difference was empowering the person on the ground.
Yeah.
The traditional model would have been, yeah, head office controls everything, you give instructions, you execute, right? It
Yes.
doesn't work on this model.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying before. We found it very amazingly different.
You
So
broke
just,
all procedures completely.
yeah,
Yeah.
say the person in New York, empower him to get it done. You are able to do it. Don't try to, you just cannot control the single location the way you used it before.
Yeah.
In India, 1,000 people are here. Just left it to me and my top team. We decided how to do it. There are so many rules here also we have to follow. Nobody bothered. We did it. Exactly same way we dealt with each. So we had a completely changed the way we work and say, instead of controlling everything centrally, empower the front line of people. They will decide how to comply with. Uh, they will decide the daily way they want to work. They will decide the productivity outcome. But all we did was two things: communication, importantly, messages. Employee safety is important.
Absolutely.
Client delivery is important. Take care of these two, remaining we know you will take care, right? And reach out to us if you want. That message amazingly helped KK.
Okay, that's great. Good to know that people responded and you were able to, give your results as required with the management. Uh, Santosh, what are the shifts in leadership model necessitated by the pandemic? Can you elaborate upon the successful strategies your bank and you yourself have implemented to overcome this problem?
Uh, KK, I wouldn't claim we did anything different from other industries. In fact, I should say that many industries responded beautifully for the situation, including the banks, right? So, if I talk about something about leadership changes and strategies we did, I don't think it is fundamentally different from what others did. But uh, I would say something which made us all work towards is what I call as a pragmatic optimism. Okay. Yes, we just faced the worst, right? We never imagined we would face something like this.
Yeah,
Shut down, right?
out of the blue it has come in.
It could happen.
Yeah,
There is something in our banking sector where we look at very diligently called business continuity planning. You
yeah,
look at operations, look at other building. I've gone through stages where I said it's a different network and different transformer. All that we have done it in our life before. But never ever people think that you cannot come to office, you're shut down at home. So that was not in the planning of anybody's contingency, correct?
yeah,
So when you looked at it, it was more of a pragmatic. I mean, we looked and said, yeah, this is the worst. What more can happen? Okay,
yeah,
than this. So we have to just get it done. There's nothing more can worse can happen beyond this. So that is where I think the point on agility started. A lot of change happened within the team and the way we worked. We had to unlearn a lot, as I said, including supervision lessons and how to supervise teams, to empowerment, to how to get people leave their own way of getting things done. With situations changing every day in the initial 3 4 months, it was like one decision which you took probably would last only for 48 hours, not beyond that. You had to change it again, right? It was keeping on changing.
yeah,
So I think the ability to change and adapt is one of the leadership lessons not just banks but every institution would have gone through and adopted very well.
yeah,
Second thing to my mind comes is resilience, right? You have to bounce back to shape. You cannot let it go. You could have faced it and say, oh, what to do, but you have to come back. You have a target, you got a budget, you got a plan, you got a revenue, you got a commitment to customers to continue their transactions. You cannot just shut down. You have to do a lot more things which has to continue in that sense. There, beyond the initial stages of getting the distributed organization working, then came about a long-term view in terms of, okay, now we have to get moving. How do we get things done? What do we focus on? And that is where, after the initial planning for the distributed workforce happened and preparedness will happen, we clearly decided that our long-term view is going to be complete digital journey and digitize the whole journey of the bank. And I'll talk to you about that later. So that is a long-term view which we took. The other thing we really understood is that speed is better than elegance. You won't get it right the day one, but faster is better right now. As
yeah,
I said, you get things faster if you can in the next 3 4 months than the next 3 4 years. We can fix it. Uh, then the third one we looked at was how do you proactively resolve client needs. Obviously the client is not able to contact you. I'm talking about more of corporate and SMEs. There are a lot more demands. They are the business to run, right? And how to get that, work it out. So we were trying to solve their problem proactively, go back to them, talk to them through our RMs and say, hey, listen, these are the normal transactions which you have, and this way we want to do that for you. And that built confidence in that sense. So there was a lot of work we done on resilience part, being proactive, looking at a long-term view, and also seeing how fast to bounce back to shape. Coming to employees and leadership, KK, I would say it changed a lot. There was a lot of unlearning to be done, upskilling, and not just on the way you would adopt to the remote working, but also in terms of learning something new because the entire tech stack was changing. We were rapidly moving to cloud. We are adopting more of AI tools. They need to understand how to deal with the digital worker, as you call it, with the robots, etc. So all that pieces from an upskilling point of an employee, we invested a lot in terms of reaching out to them and looking at the skill sets which they want to learn. There were programs which we developed only for last year. The other point on leadership I just spoke to you about is the empowerment and being transparent, okay, to the employees across. We had to just be honest with them. There was consistent communication. There were transparent conversations saying this is what we are and what we can do, and this is what we expect from you. And there's also very regular communication with the customers in terms of in the initial months in terms of how we work. So we felt that the transparency and communication, the other part, which we cannot, undermine in these kind of
Yep.
circumstances. And then lastly, as I said, decentralized decision making. There's no point in holding it back. Empower people; they will do it beautifully for you. If we think that we only can do the job for everybody, then we are not anywhere there. Leave the people and they will do it. And that is one of the biggest lessons I would say in this entire journey, where we felt a fundamental difference.
So roughly globally, how many employees you all have?
We have 5,500 employees globally, of which 1,000 is in India. Okay,
Oh,
hello.
it's quite a lot.
And the next biggest market is UAE.
Yeah.
And we have, as I said, office in New York, Hong Kong, and then Mumbai then we have in most of the Middle East, we got in Egypt, a big presence. We have in Qatar, we have in Saudi, in Kuwait, representative offices in Africa. We have so we distributed in almost 14 centers in that sense.
Okay, good to know. So, ladies and gentlemen, I continue to discuss with Mr. Mahalingam. I'm sure you have some questions. So do put your questions in the Q&A box, and we will try to get it across to Mr. Mahalingam. Should you want to ask a question directly to him, you could do that. Raise your hand, and the digital team will facilitate you to ask the question directly to Mr. Mahalingam. To answer not is something that is provided. So let me go. So I'll await for your questions. Um, so many industry experts and senior bankers have said that future-proofing the business using emerging technology is one of the key takeaways for the banks. At least, you did mention about moving to cloud and AI and many other things, but perhaps the future proofing the business is adoption of emerging technologies. While you may concur with the view, which like you said, so what are the new technologies that are going to witness a rapid adoption to defy the challenges thrown by this pandemic?
So, well, KK, it's just, I did mention about the tech enablement and the digital journey a few moments
Yeah.
before. But before I come into specific technologies, I'd like to make a point. Banks have to start thinking of scale, like technology companies, not like traditional banks. Okay, it's no more. The thinking cannot be 10% or 20%. It has to be 10x or 20x kind of thing, because the number of digital transactions happening today are probably 10,000 times more than the manual transactions ever which you imagine happening today.
Yeah.
And when you start thinking that way, traditional banking, which I would have seen 25 years back versus now in terms of controls, is completely different. So we have to now start embedding practice and controls in the way systematically we look at a transactional digital manner. And to that extent, multiple technology interventions are happening on a day-to-day basis. In fact, it's changing every day, the way of saying.
Yeah.
While there's a journey towards it in terms of how we can do it in the short term and long term, but specifically, if you talk about some of the specific technologies, I spoke about cloud. I still remember 3 years back when we approached one of the major regulators to move our data into cloud, they refused, okay, saying that's not the place for you for banks. It has to be on-prem, it is confidential, banking data, etc. They never agreed. Today, nothing is going into on-prem today. Okay, it's on cloud, and because that is scalable. On-prem is not scalable. So that's come back to the scalability model, right? You can't scale your on-prem servers and capacity beyond a point of time. It has to be on cloud. And slowly regulators have realized the importance of that as well. Right?
Okay.
So cloud will come up in a big way. The other one, if you look at a technology, is what I call mobile first technology, if you want a better term. I don't think anybody is even going to switch on their laptop to do a more banking transactions anymore, especially the Gen Y and Gen X. They want everything on their mobile. So anything you design has to be a mobile first kind of.
Absolutely.
So that is the second part which I'm seeing the entire industry around mobile banking technology, usability, UI, UX, security. All that is a bigger parts which will come in the banking space from a technology adoption point of view.
Yeah.
Third one, I would see rapidly adoption, which will happen is the open banking APIs. I think the time of banks limiting their entire network to themselves, not opening up for other fintech players is gone. There'll be a lot more aggregation happening in industry. There'll be a lot more tools, a lot more applications which will want access to the banking knowledge. Otherwise, people find shortcuts to do that. So more and more, we have a lot of how do I put it? We will have to adopt our technology framework and systems to API banking and to allow aggregators to work in a much more bigger way. So that is definitely going to happen. I don't want to underestimate the level of adoption which has already happened on artificial intelligence and machine learning. You probably would see, you write to a bank, you get immediately a reply, or any organization, right, you get a reply. It's a chatbot replying to you, right? You call a call center. It's no more the voice interactive stuff. You got a beautiful lady talking to you. It's not a lady actually; it is a voice. So,
Yeah.
but it's AI again. Get to that coming. So the benefits AI has brought in is humongous in terms of digitizing number of touch points with customers, and in fact, it's going beyond banking as well in that sense. Uh, the other one, which is a huge uptake, will happen in the entire banking industry and new technologies, Robo Advisories. You have a lot of advisory services which is coming in,
Yeah.
and very limited, I should say, so far. Traditionally, banks have looked at mining data or giving some valuable advice. So that is one thing which will come up in a big way. Uh, Along with the data, and which we don't expose to customers very well, and slightly different deviation I'm taking here is something on the technology around reporting and visualization tools. People don't really present data very well as a story today. It's more of data which is present as an MI than a story which you can interpret. So there'll be a lot of visualization tools which will be demanded in the market for banks to present their assessment, their interpretation, and their sales pitch and their investment proposal to customers in a big way. So, of course, collaboration tools like what you and me are using today is already there. It's adopted. I'm
Yes.
going to be doing anything bit more. But one thing I would say which is underestimated today from a technology adoption and which will come later is proper knowledge management systems and solutions. We are in a distributed model. No more training will happen with 55 people being together or 20 people together in a room. We'll have to figure out ways how to develop the Google within the banks internally. Today, for you can't go outside and say, my son or my daughter doesn't even ask me any queries anymore of this coding, right? They go to Google and find out. For them, the solution is Google. Same way, I'm sure many employees also look at Google for doubts. But within a bank, how to transact, what are the rules, what are the SOPs, what are the regulations you comply? It won't be too far off when there will be mini Googles within each bank, and those systems will really develop because training, the traditional model of on the job training, etc., will go. Your systems, the way you want to put it, is very intuitive and free flowing, and employees and new staff will have to look at the same way we self learn on any process. And therefore, I think a complete new evolution of knowledge management systems should come up with. Uh, that's what I would say beyond what is already there today. We have RPAs, cognitive intelligent automation, all that is existing, but I'm new, but to go deeper in something new. These are the some aspects which I believe will come up. Okay.
Yeah, so you did touch upon quite a few. Yeah, Santosh, just for the audience purpose, if you could just summarize like one, two, three, what are the emerging technologies?
Cloud is one.
Yes.
Mobile banking technologies is one I would look for.
Yeah.
Uh, Open banking API integration.
Yeah.
Third, artificial intelligence and machine learning.
Yeah.
Definitely. Robo advisories will come up. Visualization tools,
Yeah.
knowledge management systems, and of course, blockchain is there, but it's not fully come up. I would
Yeah.
still see blockchain in the loop as to at some point in time to really explode in that area. It's not yet come up yet. It will take a long time. So these are the 7 or 8 ones.
Excellent. So I have a question for you from one of the audience, Mr. Prabhakar Kaza. He is from London. Mr. Kaza, good morning to you. There is a report stating that the virus will die down only after 7 to 10 years. Are the economies going to slide down till then? And how will banks cope up for such a long period?
Well, I can't comment on the virus of 7 years or economies. I'm not an expert in that. Right? Okay. But I can tell you from a banking point of view,
Yes.
and we'll touch upon a bit on the way we want to look at the customer engagement, right? We are resigned or reconciled to the fact that there's a new normal way of dealing with customers. There's a different way of customer engagement. It is not going to be the face-to-face one which was there before. It is more of remote. And how do we deepen that relationship and get the same level of service and income? Uh, while we can talk about virus and economies, etc. I feel there is a new way of banking which will come up tomorrow. And that banking is just not the traditional bank we're talking about, because it won't be too far off when fintech companies will come up and pick up what you're doing. They're already doing the digital payment space, right? It's more fundamentally different. But I would say if banks need to survive, they can't be in the traditional big spending, capital intensive kind of industry. They have to be nimble, they have to be very agile and fast. They have to start thinking technology, as I said, in a bank. They have to start thinking like fintech companies. They can't compete with them, collaborate to do what you want, but you can't get the. It's already happening in many, smaller banks in that sense. Uh, and go beyond traditional banking services, right? So today you're looking, what are you doing for a bank as a normal customer? Yeah, look at, I want lending facilities, I want CASA accounts, I need some advisory, etc. No, it has to go beyond that. If you want to survive tomorrow, I think the bank should be the one-stop shop for customer needs.
Yeah.
I'll just give a simple example to answer that. It may or may not evolve, but I think people are already thinking about it.
Sure.
Today, when you want to buy a car, KK, you go to a showroom.
Yeah.
You, you go to one of the Maruti showrooms or Merck for that matter, whatever you look at. You choose the car, and then the dealer tells you, hey, listen, I have three financial service providers here who have a desk who will give you a loan. Okay. And he may have a preference to one of them, or he push you to three of you can choose. Imagine a time which won't be far off when you want to buy a car. You are not going to the showroom. You have your RM at a call and say, hey, my chief, XYZ bank, I'm calling you. I want to buy a car. That person says, thank you for calling. I know you're calling me because you want to loan with us and because you're my primary bank. I will send the dealer to you whom you can deal with. You choose the car with the I will do everything in the back end. All you need to do is to sign a paper which is sent to you. Everything else I take care. Today you don't do that. Today bank is in the background, right? So that way banks will have to start offering marketplaces for each customer. I took a very simplistic example, but I'm sure there are many examples I can quote in the wealth management space like that where you deal with it. So those are the evolution which you have to do if we look at long term how you want to. So we have to find new avenues of income. Interest income was deferred in UAE, for example, right from March till December. The customer had a choice to defer his interest income. Now, that is the biggest revenue you had. India, it was 2 months, 3 months, right? In UAE, it was full year. How do you can accrue the interest, but you don't have cash, right? So you're looking at one of your top line revenue not being there for a few months. We have to branch out to find out new avenues of income. So it may impact economy. There may be 7 years, 8 years, right? But unless we are innovative enough to look at alternate source of income, how we want to do it by creating something different, move away from traditional role, banks will get impacted. Of course, you have to one step ahead of them.
Okay. I have another question for you, and this is more about the um, announcement by Mashreq Bank. And so he wants to know that payment holidays for credit card holders were provided by the bank. So how popular were they, and did it have the right impact to amongst the credit card holders?
So not only just payment holidays, but also interest deferment had a lot of uptake from customers. Okay. Uh, a lot of customers took it and we obliged them because there's a difficult period in terms of salaries being deferred or not being there and job losses, etc. That is something we look from an angle of how we want to partner the customer during the difficult times also, right?
Okay.
It's not a good time. So that's something we did. And uh, we do believe there could be a period at a later point of time when, like any other banks which you look into, there could be some, asset quality issues which may come in much later. But right now, we're not experiencing that. On the retail side, it's a perfectly, reasonably well underwritten book, and people are picked up. But amazingly, it's not that everybody who did it. And that's where I think the responsibility of customers also has come out. It's not that everybody went and said, I'll just not pay. Who could pay or paid, actually. Okay. There's
Yeah.
also, when I say the empowerment, I also see the empowerment from customers also exercising it very diligently, saying, why should I ask for it? There are people who need it, they will do it. It's not that everybody ran around and took it, right? So that is something which, we are really appreciative of the customers and the way they have come up with that.
Excellent. Um, so, one of the key sorry, the takeaways of the pandemic has been that rapid adoption of technology, which you also mentioned. Given this bag, so I mean, we already covered the emerging technologies. So
Yeah.
sorry about it. Let me take a next question from Pushpendra Khandelwal. He says, sir, during the pandemic, you told that empowering of the front line is the greatest lesson learned by you. But I will ask regarding Indian scenario, what is your view for Indian bank system as you told about your bank? Indian banking system as told about your bank. Whether Indian banks learn the lessons for BCP, work from home, digitization of all transactions, and customer interface.
Uh, we don't operate in India, so I'm finding it difficult to answer the question directly.
Yeah,
Uh, So I won't be able to answer that purely about Indian banks in terms, because we have a very limited presence in India with respect to FI and corporate, very limited presence. We are mostly, as I told you, international bank. But I can tell you about my experience, personal experience. Okay.
yeah,
We had we have today 1,000 employees and another 250 partners, consultants working with us, 1,200 people working for Mashreq in India, and 70% are not in the location where we have our office. We are located out of Bangalore. Okay. 70% of those 1,250 are not in Bangalore today. They are in their hometown, which were part of the country, ranging right from West Bengal to Kerala, spread across.
okay,
They're working from their home, the hometown, as I call it today. Okay. I can tell you that not even a single day has passed where we had an impact on SLAs. They work hard to meet it. There are days when they had power cuts, the power outages near. Of course, we gave them
yeah,
advances with respect to backups, etc. But still, not even a single day in the last 11 months. We are after the resilience. We met it, both on the technology, operations, underwriting, every shop. And it's not that our volumes have come down. Of course, leaving out April, May of last year, where there was enough confusion across. From June, it's back to normal for us as far as the processing volumes are concerned. Everybody have kind of committed to that and done it. So I could say from that angle of an experience, what I have, people have adopted to that. People are adopted to the empowerment given to them. They are responsible enough to ensure that or understand that what is their role they play in those difficult times, which is slightly different from the other times. They have responded beautifully. And our experience on that has been pretty good.
okay,
On a different note, I speak to some of my peers. They also take the same story. It's not fundamentally different. So I would say that to a large extent, the empowerment and the way people have taken up their role and responsibility to execute what they are accountable for in other organizations also is reasonably work well. This is what I understand from my conversation with folks. Digital adoption by Indian banks, I don't want to comment. It's only a third party information like you have, right? I don't have other information beyond that.
sure, absolutely. So, one of the you mentioned that one of the biggest fallout of the pandemic is that I think banks, especially, and of course all other industries, have begun to rely more and more on the technology because technology seems to be a savior for the future, pandemic or epidemics or whatever names that come up. Um, do you see a threat of the big tech companies with the banks?
Uh, I would rather not call big tech. I will call them fintech. To
Fintech, okay.
right. We can define them big, but there are many small companies also who are doing beautifully well, right?
Okay.
So let's look at this from a slightly different angle. KK. I mean, customers today have experienced the Apple way of experience, right? None of us had an Apple way of Apple experience 10 years back, 15 years back. When I first got my Apple phone and I was looking at an iPhone, I said, oh, wow, it's fantastic. The touch and the way you do it beyond the other phones which came in. Then started the revolution for all of us. Standards were changed. It was something different after that. Anybody came in afterwards had to meet the standards of what they put in. So today, if you look at from the fintech or big tech, as we call it, KQ, what do the customers experience from that, right? One, they experience ease of use. No training required, they can use it intuitively. My dad, who's 81 years old, is a great fan of Samsung. He's used all apps, he orders stuff in Flipkart. I'm amazed myself, but he does it, right? Ease of use, nobody trained him. Very limited documentation to open anything anywhere. Okay. Even if you want to use a phone pay account or Paytm, limited stuff. Link to Aadhaar, OTP done, you're through, authenticated, KYC done. Self-service, you don't depend on anybody. You want to do it, you do it there. Okay, instant. Instant is very important. You get instant fulfillment, freedom of choice, and you're in control of the transaction. These are the things which you experience with fintech. You take any kind of solution. Now, if banks don't meet some of these experiences, and you want to transact something, you say, come to the branch and wait in the queue, take a token, you're dead. You're dead.
Absolutely.
You're going to reach anywhere with that. So today's, and I'm not talking about the Gen X or Gen Y, I'm not talking. Okay? I'm talking about a person like my father who's 81 years old. He's not going to a branch anymore. He's saying, why do you go to the branch? And he has a mobile app on his phone. I'm equally amazed with the way he's done it, but he has that with him. So it's not a question of the generation which is coming, it's spread across the entire spectrum. I don't know when I wrote a check, I forgot.
Yeah.
It's all instant transfers today. It's instant. IMPS is really instant, and I love the way it is happening today. So unless banks are able to replicate the experience of this fintech or big tech companies, as I call it, in terms of self-service, shifting it largely to that rather than assisted service or going to the branches and doing it. Ability to have a freedom of choice. We'll have to change the way we look at a product definition. Today, what is happening is banks have a standard product they offer to customers. I don't think they want it anymore. They want the tailored products. So it may reach a stage where we have to look at an aggregation of products in that sense, so multiple places to offer them. Instant fulfillment. This is extremely critical. They're not willing to wait. You want to open a account, you need to operate it next minute. You can't wait for a checkbook to come in, your ID to come in 7 days later by courier. You're not anymore into that. You want it immediately to open, right? The other thing which is very interesting today, which will come up, is the deeper transactional insights to customers, which many big tech firms have. Banks, I don't think, leverage data the way they should be doing it. There's a lot more you can do on that front. So if you look at the power of convenience, which the big tech or fintech companies use or allow, the superior user experience, the mobility, these innovative solutions, the self-service, all these are principles which banks have to adopt quickly. If they don't do, you're going to lose a lot of people. And that is the journey when I say digital adoption.
Yes.
It is just not a tech stack, it is the experience. It is the journey which you want to look at. And that is where people have realized that we have to do it much more faster than ever before. Okay. We're losing our time. That's what I would say about big tech comparison.
Absolutely. Yep. Any pandemic just throw up a lot of problems, but it also throws up a lot of opportunities for people. So I think adoption of technology perhaps is a great opportunity for banks to adopt to continue to restart and grow their business. So let's take one question from our audience, Santosh. Yeah? We have a very experienced banker. So obviously, it's going to be a banking question. Mr. Harish Prabhu would like to ask you a question directly. Harish, can you please ask the question?
Yeah. Hi, Santosh. You know what? I mean, since the last 3-4 years or so, India and the UAE, as well as Saudi Arabia, etc., that the GCC and the Middle East region have been sort of having a much better bonhomie of sorts And Mashreq being, one of the what you call premier private sector banks in the region, and you've had a presence in India for a while, post pandemic, as and and also post pandemic, has Mashreq does Mashreq have any larger plans in terms of exercising an opportunity in India that it offers on the lines like a DBS or so? Pardon me, I need to make a caveat. I was the ex-chief executive of Mashreq in India. So please feel free not to answer the question.
No problem, Harish. Will answer that. No issues. I know. I've been Mashreq for last 7 years, Harish. So I'm sure you would have probably before that. I don't know when you were chief executive for Mashreq in India, but glad to meet you at least now. In that sense.
Good part of technology, right?
Yeah. Okay. So Harish, the answer to your question, India is an important part of the international banking business of Mashreq. And I'm sure you would have been based in Mumbai when you were with us. Uh, there are no immediate plans to expand the retail footprint, not in the near future. We'll continue what we do today, both in the corporate and FI space. We're not probably looking at any in the near future, at least the next couple of years, look at retail footprint at this moment as we decided. Things may change later in that sense. Leaving aside the banking part of it, what we have decided as a bank, is to leverage on the operating model we have today. And we're looking at enhancing the presence of our hub in Bangalore much more than it was before. So we are moving a lot more work here, roles here into India, uh, voice-based, non-voice-based, product kind of roles, risk-based roles. Many of them will move during the course of the next 12 months, which is nothing but the confidence the bank has in the capability of the delivery centers in India, and we want to develop this as a center of excellence here. So that is the one change which I would say from a Mashreq point of view we have as impacting India. On terms of the businesses, what you would have seen, the lines of businesses, what you would have seen a few years back, the specific questions pertaining to retail, the answer is not in the near future.
Yeah, the only reason why I asked is that, because in the last 3-4 years, India has attracted a lot of investment on the equity side from, let's say, an ADIA. Billions of dollars have been committed to India on the equity side, right?
Yeah.
So obviously, as a follow-up to that, I'm sure that the banks wanted to follow and, probably. So anyway, thanks for the question. Thanks for the answer. Okay.
Thank you, Harish. Glad that this platform has brought two one ex-Mashreq bank and current Mashreq, together on the same platform. Tough questions, but it's okay. So we looked at the technology aspect, Santosh. Let's look at the financial aspect. Do you foresee banks to revisit their financial practices and lay out a foolproof framework to plug the existing loopholes that may have been opened up during this pandemic?
See, KK, I don't think we have seen anything fundamentally, at least the market we are looking for, fundamentally look at any change in the financial practices per se. Obviously, we reacted to the regulatory norms and changes which came into. Anything different to that in terms of prudent accounting and prudent underwriting and good books continues to be the key focus areas. So in that sense, the change I wouldn't say it's limited to the financial practices, but like I said earlier, the transformation which we are going through typically is broadly, redefine the operating model like I spoke about. We are now convinced that a remote distributed workforce can work right across the globe in that sense. Okay, so the operating model, will definitely something we will change. Our focus on building a digitally driven organization with the various tech stack I spoke about will continue to happen and invest. We are looking at a lot more on leveraging the power of data. Okay, we need to have a lot more data scientists with us in terms of interpreting and giving value-added solutions to customers. And as I said, there's a reinvention of the customer journey. These are the core stuff you do. You don't focus just on financial practice because that's not the way you want to do on an isolation, right? Along with the whole thing, how do you develop, how to look at new avenues is what is more important than making any specific practices changes to fix loopholes, as you call it, right? I wouldn't think so. That's not the right way of doing it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Another question that has come up is, this says tough times require certain leniency, deferment. Did the tough Basel III implementation norms, did they get deferred in banks? And do you have any knowledge for that?
My frank answer is I'm not too familiar with that. I wouldn't be able to answer it.
Okay, that's more on the, I know, that's why I said it's more on the risk side. So we couldn't. Um, uh, did another question is, did the DRP plan that bank had, did that get kicked ever? Because we've from the question that I get, I understand that we all do drills, once in a quarter and all that, and but it's all planned drills. Everybody knows this is happening and all that, and then we say that we did a great thing. Here is a case where you had to kick in. Did it happen, and how did you all manage it?
Well, KK, I would imagine it didn't happen for any organization, right?
Yes, absolutely.
That was the surprise of the entire thing. Now, forget bank. Every organization had a disaster recovery plan. They had a business contingency plan. Everything. None of them looked at this. But
Yeah,
for these, let me tell you, on a serious note, I think what really helped us, though it is not a drill or something which we did, was
yeah,
we invested in collaborative tools much before, and that really helped us. We invested in the VDI infrastructure as well much before. Had we not done that, in much in advance as part of a BAU couple of years or and back, I don't think we would have been able to swiftly move into this distributed work. So that investment in the past, with respect to collaborative tools, with respect to VDI infrastructure, with respect to the specific infosec platforms which we built in and controls, really helped us to do it. Had not been for that, we would not have been able to do it. So it's more of a given in that sense. But traditional drills, etc., I would say I don't think any organization anticipated this in our world, right?
absolutely. Yeah, it was like actually in a DRP, people say, "Can I pull the plug out?" You know, and then do a DRP. That's a common thing that the auditors ask, but we say no, that's not possible. Last question, because we've already reached the 1 hour mark. Last question, with your intelligence. Change management has been perhaps one of the big factors that have come in into with this pandemic. You think a good adoption of policy of change management and implementation is something that is a must to do now?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think change management principles are far more important if that's the question you're asking about.
Yeah,
We have seen it happening in the last 1 year. It was a change to the scale which was unprecedented. It couldn't have been managed without having some level of sense or order into it, looking at the various aspects of what you wanted to cover. There is definitely a proven, method on how you want to handle these kind of significant changes, covering various aspects of customers, workplace, employees, regulators, governance, etc., etc. So all that is important. So I would say uh, the importance of smart governance, the importance of change management rigor, and the importance of checks and balances, be it embedded or not embedded, is far more critical now than any other time. We can't discount that. There can't be a madness coming in and saying everybody does. There has to be a control of the whole thing, and things will work out.
okay, great. Thanks, Santosh. Santosh, you have any concluding remarks?
Uh, Specifically, as I said, if you look at future for banks, the way I want to look at it, many banks have really relooked at the entire model and moving towards that. And I've seen from my personal interactions, few Indian banks also doing it very nice and very beautifully. In fact, I would say some of the technology developments and the user interfaces and other stuff what they have is far more superior than many other banks they put in. So that's a real growth we have put in, in the country here, and I'm sure that the industry is in the right trajectory. A few years later, as we have seen banking develop in the last few years, we would see a significant shift also in the way it is being positioned to customers, both corporate and individual customers. And as end customers, we will start probably, enjoying a lot more banking in the future. Right.
Hey. Yeah, when you work for the bank, you're also a customer, so you also want to get that. Thank you, Santosh. So, we're so interesting talking to you. 1 hour is just flown by, and so we have to take cognizance of the time, your time as well as the audience time. Thank you very much for coming, spending your time with us. It's a holiday, I know, for you, but and spending time with us and taking all the questions. And there's a lot of details you have mentioned, a lot of good points you mentioned. I'm sure our audience will. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for participating. Please join me in thanking once again Mr. Santosh Mahalingam for coming and talking to us. And look forward to meeting you at some other point of time. And while I say goodbye to the guest as well as all of you, I must once again apologize for the delay because my laptop, the Murphy's Law kicked in, and I had delayed for a few minutes. Thank you very much. I wish you all a great evening ahead of you. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Thank you. Have a great weekend. Bye.